Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Monster Hunter Wilds. With the hefty pile of live Scarlet Forest gameplay we did a big video about everything we learned in that. Now I'm back to talk about monsters specifically. 4 large monsters were shown after all. We have quematrice, we have Labarina, we have duna even, and of course Congalala in action now. So we're going to talk about everything we saw and learned about them from the gameplay, but also the translated commentary. So let's begin with the first monster shown, quematrice, which has... yes, very much a chicken theme. It has the same kind of head comb that they have, but now we see that in its passive behavior, where it's just kind of hanging out on a pile of stuff that it has, pecking the ground in a more passive mode. I would love to talk more about the mechanics of this monster, but sadly, the hunter is just kind of walking up and looking at it. They do sneak up and loot under it, a pile of something it's got, which upsets it, but then they pretty much just hit it with a lure pod, leading it to nearby endemic style trap. So other than that awesome fire spin that we did see in the trailer, we don't know much more about it mechanically from this just yet. However, we do now know that quematrice is considered the smallest brute wyvern, and as a carrion eater, it will conflict with lots of other monsters because of it. The hunter, though, as we see, draws it to a nearby raptor nest that immediately knocks it down, seemingly functioning basically like a shock trap or something, but with small monsters in a similar way to the way we would use endemic life. Really cool to see. So hopefully we'll learn more about that one soon, but let's now move on to the Scarlet Forest, where our first monster shown properly is Labarina. Immediately we see that whole ballerina theme and concept living up to its name with all these spin attacks, but it does spin around to use the stinger in particular. As we'll discuss with the stinger, it's actually not just used during the enrage. We see how it spins and then turns it back to you to reveal the stinger, then thrust out with it in a simple way. I do think that's a lot more predictable than what we see with the enraged version use of that, but it was Josh that was saying that this is very Nazilla-esque, and with it being an instant paralyze when it lands that, yeah, it's still pretty scary. A key attack we see it used throughout though are the lala florets. These floating flowers come out from her flower abdomen, which she pulls out for this attack as a very clear tell before it happens. Now when you walk into them, you get a bit of paralyzed status build-up, but you have to walk into multiple before it actually happens. You can see the status building up or decaying at the top left, just above your health bar. So when you have it procced by walking into multiple, you now have a timer that's counting down to let you know when you're finally able to move again. These are potent though. We even see them stun another monster later in the gameplay. But to counter them, avoid them, or attack them. We see the hunter use a bowgun later on to destroy them, but we imagine you could do the same thing with melee attacks too, so that could be a way to manage them. Later we get to take a real look at Lala versus doshaguma in the proper turf war. We saw that in the trailer 4, but only a bit of it. Here what we see is the second half. So Lala jumps onto the back and that looks good, deals some damage. Then Dosha grabs one of its legs and slams it down, proceeding to do a wombo combo of like 3 hits after. This does prove that they're considered relatively equal tier monsters though, since this is considered equal or a draw. That's because they both dealt damage to each other. Josh was telling me that the result of a turf war can go either way when it's even. And in this case, yeah, Lala is the one running away. But with this scene, we can now say that the Windward's playing balance in terms of power is Chatacabra being the weakest, then you've got doshaguma above that and Railgun at the top. Meanwhile in the Scarlet Forest, you probably have Congalala at the bottom, Lala in the middle, and duna at the top. But like I said, we do see doshaguma get paralyzed after that. It's hard to say for sure, but it does look like Labarina just before the turf war sent out some florets, which the doshaguma fell into after that, held in place. Was that part of the turf war and always going to happen, or just a bit of RNG? After this though, we see Lala's flower staying out as we chase her, so we seem to see her in an enraged state now, maybe shown by that flower. Also, her longer arm claws come out, so that's another really clear tell. So while she's enraged, we see a lot more intense use of the stinger, using it in aggressive, faster combos, which you don't want to be hit by once, because again, it's a straight stun. We also see those bigger claws freaking out in fast combo too, but it's funny, the devs were commenting on how they're quite worried they're about to cart during this phase, so just one of these stuns could lead to a nasty combo that would cart you. But to us, looking at it, we were talking about how even though when it's raised it's quicker, it's still a lot calmer than we imagined from the trailers. Some people may struggle more with doshaguma than this, we'll have to see. But we are wondering about the low to high rank comparisons, and if they'll increase the overall speed of this monster alongside just new moves. On the topic of the stinger though, it was confirmed during this that you can physically destroy it, to the point where she can't use it anymore, but you can only do that while she's currently enraged, so I expect the stinger to be an important target while she's enraged, and that to be an important material for crafting. Another detail we noticed is it took them a long time to actually generate a wound here. We're thinking that some monsters could be more resistant to wound generation than others, though it could have also been a gameplay thing. Lastly, they took us to see Lala's nest, where we know she's going to get some unique moves. Here we just look at it though, she's not even here, and this is interesting considering she's not an apex. This suggests that many monsters might get the powerful nest treatment, not just the big boys, as we'll see later on. So next for this hunt, we have duna. This occurs on a separate save though that they swapped to, hence the new gear and weapon. duna should be found during the downpour, the time of inclemency in the Scarlet Forest. And generally you can imagine that as just heavy rain that results in water level areas being higher, and that has some mechanical impact with this apex. So that brings us to the encounter. She is huge. And not just that, a unique shaped Leviathan. When they later open the map, you can see on the left some hunter notes, where we can see duna and her true body that's kind of hidden under those wing veils that she has. We're wondering whether you can break through those to get to the body, if that'll be a weak point or not, or in general, it does seem like hitting those wings, breaking the veil is a good idea, as we'll say. Either way, in this encounter, she opens with a big roar and then this very slow arm drag. The force of the impact is big because she's big, knocking the hunter down. The speed of the attack is very slow. Compared to other kind of snaky leviathans, she is a slower type. But with that comes impact, as we see with the big belly flop that we saw in the trailer. This creates these waves from the slam location, which had the hunter reeling, but then flying backwards for a bit of damage after it really takes hold. Will we be able to roll through these, or will you need some kind of new mobility skill to help? Because basically the deep water affects you, her attacks all cause these waves that you'll need to think about. It's kind of an echo effect, but I wouldn't overly worry about it. It's not like she's doing it constantly. There's various moves and attacks she has that generate little waves that look cool as a mechanic, but won't impact you in the same way. It's only the big moves where it really happens, like for example this prepped spin, reminding me actually of Mizutsune, which after a delay sends out a big wave in all directions to deal with. Seemingly more about the wave than her attack directly. Moving forward, shortly after this, we get a look at the awesome apex level clash that occurs with such a huge monster. It looks a bit comical that an SNS is fighting this. But we should talk about her unique water veil. As you can see, when landing hits, the numbers are coming up blue and there's a little shield icon next to it. The idea here is that we need to get through this barrier with damage before normal yellow damage can start to happen. Breaking through the veil then seems to be key to good DPS, so we're wondering if there's a skill to help with that, or some area that you're supposed to focus like her wings. The information on that veil is that she uses both water and her own supply to kind of create it, so we do wonder if you drag her out of water areas, if it'll fade with time, that kind of thing. But overall, it's awesome to see a monster with a unique mechanic like this that isn't a flagship or an elder dragon. Eventually, after another slam and unavoided wave, the hunter is inflicted with water blight, shown via the icon above the health or the blue stamina bar. We very much expected she'd have this kind of blight though, so not a huge surprise. Amazingly, in this example though, the period changes. We go from the downpour into a time of plenty. That's when the colours start to pop, things are brighter, without that heavy rain the water level drops, and so the waves she generates aren't nearly as bad. Visually, duna changes too. She has this full colour that becomes more vibrant. It's very pretty on the wings in particular. Despite the change, her water veil barrier doesn't instantly fade, as we still see more blue shielded damage as the hunter lands some blows. So again, we imagine the veil will fade with time. We didn't get to see that because the hunter leaves the fight at this point. In regards to her nest, we're still not sure exactly where, but we do see this big area where fishing is done, and we saw it in trailer 4. It's so big and it's right next to a kind of outer bounds water area that in trailer 4 we may have seen her jump out to and start to create this barrage of waves by doing multiple slams. It could very well be that this big area here is her nest. Finally for this hunt though, we find Congalala. What's interesting about Congalala here is how the moment the period changes to plenty, Congalala's quest popped up with rewards on the right. So we're actually assuming that Congalala is active during the time of plenty in particular, maybe not always. But let's talk about him specifically. This appears to be his nest, right under this massive honey wall, a huge nest of bees that he's sleeping under. This sleeping animation is very familiar. You'll actually notice from a lot of attacks, it's a very familiar version of the monster. Mainly a glow up visually, with some cool mechanical subtle stuff too, like the breath attacks. If you're wondering, the stench debuff was confirmed in that if he lands one of these kind of breath fart attacks on you, you can't use items for a while. Like in the past, deodorant would remove that, so we are expecting something similar. Congalala's OG mechanic though is that he'd forage for mushrooms. He'd use different options to change his breath attacks for poison, paralysis, and blast blight. And yeah, we see examples of that here. He opens by eating a poison mushroom to start, changing the breath to poison, but later we see a blast mushroom being eaten as if from nowhere. If you paid attention though, you'll see that he seems to steal it directly from the hunter, whipping the tail to grab it from you. And after eating it, that's when we see the blast breath. The devs commented on how the different breath attacks have unique ranges and sizes now, so depending on which he's using, it might be bigger, smaller, tighter, that kind of thing. But you will see lots of classic moves, like the triple swing fallover or the belly slams, but it doesn't seem like there's any ground tremors. Josh was telling me that you used to need tremor resist for certain ground tremors he'd generate from the belly slams and such, so maybe they've removed that, or maybe higher rank version. Design wise though, you'll see the pink fur is a lot longer, and Ryozo did say that this is a long requested monster to come back. But overall this Congalala is very faithfully done, so many moves are just one for one with more of a visual polish to it. So it should be a fun update for him, especially for people that just never fought him. But there you have it, that's my overview of the 4 monsters shown and hunted somewhat in this new gameplay. Though I would love to learn more about Quematrice. I understand they wanted to go to the forest fast, but it was a shame. Duna's wave mechanic is visually brilliant, but I don't think I saw the hunter actually avoid it once, so I'm thinking there must be a way, whether that's blocking or rolling or maybe a skill. And I also want to know how you effectively break the veil, whether you use specific types of damage like fire or just by hitting certain points. Other stuff I want to see is like Lala properly function in the nest, or Congalala if he uses the honey nest in a specific way. They did instantly drag him away with a lure pod, so maybe that was intentional. Mainly though, I think I speak for a lot of us when I say, is there a demo and when? Seeing so much gameplay is great, but god, it makes waiting harder. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.